One way I set myself up for disappointment is by claiming what has been called a special status in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I mean by that is that special status means, well, this is going to happen to all the rest of you, but it shouldn't happen to me. See, it's almost like I think that I have an exemption from somehow I got an exemption from the draft, for example, right? Is that somehow I'm not going to be pulled into the same things that happen to people in life.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me is producer Patrick Newman and Dr. Alan Berger. How are you boys doing?
Well, here we are. This is a Saturday. Thank you guys for being flexible and recording today. I'm excited. I'm going to be on the Delaware River tomorrow on a raft.
You let us know if you see the ghost of George Washington.
It sounded like a punishing thing or something. They're just going to set you adrift on a raft.
I'm on the Delaware River.
What did you do? Did you already piss off the Northeast? I mean, what?
So I'm excited. I've done a few tubings at one point in time where you just hop in a river on a hot day and tube. I was in once when the temperature was like 125 degrees, and we jumped in this river and we were tubing, and it was the greatest way to spend a hot 4 hours on. And so this company has been in business for 50 years on the Delaware River. And I was going out last week to take Cece to a play date, and I saw all these rafts and tubes coming down. And then a bus passes me by Bucks County River Trips. Mm-hmm. And I, Googled them this week, and they had some reservation open tomorrow morning. So we're going to head out on the river on a raft.
Whitewater rafting is fun, but that tubing is we used to where the Piney River is down by where the ranch is, where you and I met. The population has grown out there, and I don't think it's the same, but it used to be such a cool place. We would do just that. We would just get tubes, and it would be like several hours down. I remember the sunburn I had on the first day because I didn't even consider that I'm just going to be laying out in a tube in the sun for all these hours. But we have such wonderful memories with our friends from the ranch doing that. So that's it. And you guys are. You guys are going to have fun. That's great.
I'm really excited. So thank you guys for being flexible.
Hey, no problem.
Of course.
And, I'm going to pretend I'm George Washington at one point crossing the Delaware, and I'll imagine there's ice on the river.
You'll stand up and try to strike that pose and fall over. That's the video I want.
I suggested the topic for today because of so much been going on the last few weeks politically, and and just the theme with a lot of my clients lately has been disappointment. There's been so many disappointing events, in terms of our society, and then that's at the social level, but at the personal level, so many people have lost jobs, and relationships have gone south, and it's a very, very difficult time, as we've all experienced through COVID.
Yeah. So that's the top. That's the topic.
Yeah. The topic is disappointment today.
Oh man. Come on.
I knew one of us would get.
Sorry, you lobbed that one over. I mean,
I did lob that. I'm good at setting you up at the net.
You did. That was a nice setup.
Putaways.
No, I agree. Alan, it's very important.
Yeah, I trust you, Alan, to have a sense of proportion. But do you think these days being, I don't know, the last 6 to 12 months have been like any more disappointing on the whole than times past, or is it always like this?
It's a very interesting question. You guys know that I've started to turn into a bit of a history buff around the Revolutionary War. And I've just finished another book on it called Band of Giants. And it's an in-depth exploration of the generals mostly and the soldiers that fought the Revolutionary War. And, from I don't know what it is. And I thought that these guys would be revered and celebrated and stuff like that. Well, first of all, after the first 2 years of the war went on, I think, 6 years or something like that. After the first 2 years of the war, Congress distanced themselves from the whole Continental Army. They didn't make sure that they were fed. These guys are fighting in the winter with no shoes on. Hardly they don't have jackets. Some of them don't even have shirts. I mean, the camps that they're living in, they don't have adequate tents. I mean, they go back, they're not being paid.
It's funny. Congress has always been up to the same tricks, hasn't
it? That's what I realized.
Protecting themselves.
There is such a split between what's going on in Congress and the reality in society. It's so interesting. And at the end of the war, after these guys won, and I mean, look, when I started to read this thing, I realized what an incredible feat it was to defeat the British. This is a professional army, well-trained, well-supplied, everything. Well, the generals had, these were veterans from other wars. I mean, on paper, there's no way we should have won that war.
Right.
And I'm telling you, when you read these guys that became our general, this one guy, Knox, he was so incredibly creative in terms of supplying his forces in the way that after he would defeat, the way he said, a British officer said this, we beat them, they fall down, and then they get up again. We don't know what's going on. Right. And that was the thing that kept happening that led to their victory, is that these guys, despite the disappointment, despite the failures in these battles, they learned from every one, and they fought smarter and smarter and smarter through the thing. And do you guys see the Patriot with Mel Gibson?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that movie.
So that last battle scene, remember, you have all of the militiamen up front. They fire volleys as the British are approaching, and then they fall back, and the British are coming on, and then all of a sudden they run into the Continental Army. That was a strategy that was developed in the American Revolution by the generals, that they would put the militia out first, they shoot a few volleys, the British think, we got you, we come after them, and then they run into the Continental Army and turn the whole battle around. That happened a few times. But I mean, so, this whole thing about, what's going on politically, Patrick, I do think it's unfortunately a pattern in our society. And it's very sad, because the ideal of this country is so wonderful, isn't it?
Right. Certainly in my adult life, I've learned how much we were misled in our lessons of history of our youth. I mean, there's some wonderful books out there about, kind of what really happened in history that are very interesting to read. But the thing you talk about, though, with your example, Alan, it's persistence. I think I actually come back. It's still in Philadelphia, by the way, but it's Rocky Balboa talking to his son in the last Rocky Balboa movie, when he says it's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and get up and keep moving forward. It's the whole lecture that Sylvester Stallone wrote in that thing is absolutely brilliant. I have a client who has it framed. I gave it to her in a poster, and she has it framed on her wall at home. It's like, but that's what you're talking about. You're talking about creativity and persistence. And the other thing I think that you're bringing up that I'm really seeing and your move to Philadelphia has increased your history in history. My getting older has increased my history curiosity, because I have a sense of history now. But you realize that, yeah, so much of this stuff has been going on and with different content a little bit, but I was Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, said, if you something to the effect, if you live 40 years, you've seen everything that's going to happen, that the plot's going to repeat, and I think what this all brings me to is the idea that, and this fits perfectly into our topic of emotional sobriety. I mean, this is one of the bigger ways that we can, by being disheartened, by looking at what's going on and being disappointed and even devastated in the bigger picture of the history that we're living in, is a mistake. The thing we need to do is, and I think it sounds like what you're learning about the army and the Revolutionary War, what they were doing, these generals, is it's about doing the right thing according to who you are now. It's about getting up and being, and it's exactly what you talk about. It's getting up and being the best version of yourself today, in spite of or because of the circumstances. And at the end of the day, self-respect. I feel like I was, I call it regret reduction. Try to live your life so that you're not likely to regret the day. And it's like that's the essence of self-esteem for me. Not how much progress I'm making. And it's been that way as a writer for me. It's like I would have, I think I would have been disappointed as hell if somebody could travel back in time and tell me, well, your books are going to sell this way or not. And that, oh, well, that's not what I had in mind. But the idea is, no, that's not what it's about. It's about getting up and producing what I want to produce. It's about putting out there what I want to put out there. And it's about being the person I want to be. And I mean, that's easy. It's simple, not easy, but it's like, that's the kind of principle I think we're talking about with emotional sobriety.
Yeah. Well, I was going to read the definition of being disappointed, right? Oh, good. Because I thought it'd be good to ground this at least into a common understanding. So the dictionary says that when you're disappointed, you become sad or displeased because someone or something has failed to fulfill your hopes or lived up to your expectations. So it's a very interesting thing that it's, and people ask me all the time, well, are my expectations unreasonable? Well, yes. Sometimes they are.
Yes.
If you, let's say, expected, a boss to act a certain way, and then they act out of character, and, you had hopes that they would continue to be consistent. Well, is that an unreasonable? I don't know. I do know to count on that, right, can be a setup, right? Because you're setting yourself up to get disappointed. I was just thinking, even tomorrow, I'm so excited about the trip tomorrow. There's a part of me that could be setting myself up. Right. It could be because I've got all these hopes. I'm pretty good at nowadays rolling with the punches. So, I'm going to make it a good time no matter what's happening. It's not dependent on that. It depends on the way I show up for this trip tomorrow.
Sometimes it's just about accepting the fact that we can only, as I heard a comedian say, time travel really does exist, but it only moves in one direction and it moves in real time, unfortunately. But we can't go back. So the moment of disappointment, if I need you, if I want you to do something or be something for me, at that moment that you're not, and I learned this directly from you. One of the first things I learned about just the terminology with emotional sobriety is ask the question, powerful question, what unrealistic expectations do I have right now? And it's like, I'm a big believer in not all or nothing things. So it's like, it's actually an exception to one of my rules. The idea of I go ahead and assume that if I'm disappointed, if I'm hurt, something like that, I'm not saying could I possibly be having unrealistic expectations. I'm knowing there are unrealistic expectations at play. So I'm asking the more focused question of what are they? And a lot of times it's not. We get into the wrong debate. We get disappointed in other people because we use ourselves as the standard of measure, and that doesn't mean we're greater than everybody else. It just simply means what I'm really saying, if I'm disappointed in you, is I don't think I would do what you did in that situation, and that may or may not be true. But the other piece is the main expectation is time travel.
May not be congruent. See, a lot of people say that, but they don't check in to see, have I done that in my life? Right.
Well, that's what I mean. That's part of the humility and the respect is I can say that that's easy to do, to watch the news and sit there and say like, well, I would do this and this and this and this. And we do that, but it's like, we don't know that. It's like, we don't know how when you get there. But what I was saying too, is the other thing is the expectation of the unrealistic expectation of time travel. It's like the moment you don't meet my expectation that I may or may not know that I even had. And most of these are not things I've listed out my expectations, but the moment I'm disappointed, the moment I am hurt by whatever that is, it's not about what I expected of you in the past. It's the fact that if I continue, it takes time. We want to have our feelings. Disappointment needs to be processed. Those sadness, hurt, those are real feelings. We want to process it. When we're talking about being stuck in disappointment, what's happening is I am remaining disappointed in something that has already happened. It's like I cannot change the past. So it's like the only choices I have about going forward. Okay, now that Allen has gone, has done this, and rather than saying even the language, and you're disappointed, which means I'm just continuing to be disappointed and putting it on you, to say, okay, and at that moment in time you were disappointed, which, okay, that tells me there's a break. I had an expectation that maybe it was possible, but it's no longer possible because that moment has passed. And this is how we get ourselves stuck in defining ourselves by disappointment.
Yeah, right on. The other, and it's good. We're exploring all the different dimensions. I don't know if it was last week or the show before that, we talked about nihilism. Mm-hmm. We could define nihilism as chronic disappointment, right? I mean, it's chronic disappointment that then turns into nihilism, right? That seems to be how it's manifested. But, one of the things that I was thinking about as we were processing this whole thing is this idea that one way I set myself up for disappointment is by claiming what has been called a special status in the world. Mm-hmm. Now, what I mean by that is that special status means, well, this is going to happen to all the rest of you, but it shouldn't happen to me. See, it's almost like I think that I have an exemption somehow I got an exemption from the draft, for example, right? Is that somehow I'm not going to be pulled into the same things that happen to people in life. Right. And then when it becomes me that it's happening to, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't what was supposed to happen. This shouldn't be going on. I've been a good person. I can't tell you how many times I haven't done anything to deserve this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about that. How many times do we hear that from people? And I notice I have a reflex response when somebody says, I don't deserve this. I'm going, well, of course not. Hell, I probably don't deserve most of the good things that have happened to me either. It's like, I'm serious. It's like, God, I've said that to people before. It's like, I kind of hope that it's not based on what we deserve, because when especially earlier in recovery, but even now, if somebody says, well, you deserve, it's like, I don't know that I like that system. If I look at my entire life, all the 68 years on this planet, I don't know that I really trust the math to come back on my side if I'm going to get what I deserve. I think they may be putting me out in the ocean with a raft, and just by myself at that.
No, I think I'll probably be on that raft with you, buddy. I think you and I would be.
Part of our punishment would be put together. That's right. That's like, here, you guys deal with each other. Do that.
All right. Good luck.
But let me go back to what you were saying, because I think that this is a really good place for us to talk about. And this, I'm gonna put another term out here, and that's just that I use a lot more these days, and it's investigation. It's like, a lot of times when we describe these concepts that we're getting, we get these concepts by examining things with hindsight. So when what you describe is I think a beautiful example of that, holding ourselves, as an exception to the rule. It's like, and a lot of times when you say, if I say something along those lines to somebody, they're going to say, well, I don't do that. It's like, I mean, and not that there aren't some people who may do that purposely, consciously, and go like, that's not what we're not saying that you're thinking that you're doing that. We're saying that this is what you may discover when you investigate. Is the idea, is because the idea, I mean, the idea, I experienced that. I mean, went through that that was my part of my process when after 9/11, a terrorist attack. It's like, it was, in this country, we're so devastated, and it was like horrible and all this other stuff. But then part of what needed to be seeping in was how the rest of the world exists, and how many other places in the world where this kind of thing happens, way too much and way too often, that we're going like, okay, well, so in a way we can use these times where we feel this disappointment as a way of connecting to others, becoming more aware, more empathic to other people. It's like to be able to say like, yeah, this is tough. And I don't feel like I deserve this. And I always want to make that point that when people, because you see people get into the debate, sometimes we see that even on Thursday night group, is like when we're saying, let's look at your side of the street, let's look at what you're doing. We're not excusing anybody else. We're not saying that person didn't do something that would disappoint us or is not disappointing. It's like, in terms of the way we look at things, we're saying one of the most important things we say in emotional sobriety is that I call it the shortest version of the serenity prayer. You can only change yourself,
and all you can do.
That's it. And two ways. And one way we know, which is how I respond. And emotional sobriety really helps support this in me, and has helped me grow this part of myself, is I get to choose. And it's not just it's not just a right, it's a responsibility. I choose how I'm going to assign meaning to things that do happen in my life. I have a right to and a responsibility to decide how I'm going to interpret my world. See, because that's the place where we were as therapists. Certainly, that's where we work to help people change things. It's how you interpret it, and it's like, it's not a mind game to talk yourself out of feeling something. It's a way of becoming unstuck, is a term you use a lot.
Right.
It's like,
can I speak to some of that?
Go for it.
Yeah. How I'm interpreting the things that displease me about the politics, for example, I resist interpreting what I see oftentimes in a way that metabolizes it. I kind of don't want to feel too happy about it, because that produces like this feeling of complacency. And like, I get a lot of encouragement about that from my parents, I think, who see me so tuned up by all the horrible shit that's been going on. And talk about expectations. I think that we were all just stewing and biting our fingers off during Trump. And now that, there's been a changing of the guard, at least in my case, I have this laundry list of expectations. This is what I would like for the Democrats to accomplish. This is the public spending I would like to see. These are the institutional reforms. And when check box by check box, none of those are getting checked, I just start to go insane, because, the pendulum swings back and forth in our political system. And I can see things getting a lot worse than the way they are now in no time at all. And I guess I just, what you said about not getting tired, the Rocky thing, that means a lot to me, because it's not going to stop just because I get tired of looking at it and dealing with it. So I need to find a way to kind of keep my head up, come what may. But I guess I just want to find a way to live with what I don't like, also without fully accepting. And I guess that's what I'm talking about, the cognitive dissonance.
Can you imagine things getting worse politically and socially, and you getting better as a person?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
That's, to me, that's a guiding question that works for me. It's like that's been a turnaround in some of this stuff for me, is the idea of thinking of the fucked up world and humanity part. And, there's wonderful stuff, but the really rough stuff that just seems to repeat, like, sort of like Marcus Aurelius says about repeating the plot. He said, is the idea. That's I've come up with this metaphor that I just keep using nowadays is that we're these stones in these, and the human condition is this tumbler that's polishing us, and it's like, we get in there and that's what we're here for. We're, I don't know how the fucking universe works, but it's like, I have a friend of mine who died several years ago, but he took a place on my committee, definitely. And one of the things that he said one time, and I have kept it with me always, which is, beliefs are choices. We get to choose what we believe. He said he was saying this in response to people who feel like they have to objectively sell their beliefs to everybody else. It's not, I have to prove that my belief is an objective reality. It's like this guy was a very philosophical guy, and I just love that concept. And the idea, so one of the things I find is that I not only feel better, but I do better in my life. I'm more proactive. I'm more, is because it doesn't help my world, my family, my nation, anything else for me to feel bad. That does not actually help me. It's like, if where there's places where I feel bad, that helps to feed my motivation to do more, either intrapersonally or interpersonally, then that's a good thing. But otherwise, I'm not, and I think codependently, we've kind of learned that one of the things we're supposed to do is feel bad for things. We often will feel good. We'll feel guilty for feeling good, especially if things are going bad. It's like, but the idea of saying, I'm gonna choose to believe that humanity, my human experience is here to help me become a better person. So regardless of what's happening, I want to be the best version of myself I can be today. And that does not mean ignore what's going on, because the best version of myself will speak out about political things and social things that need to be spoken, because that's, to use Allen's term, congruent. We're trying to be as congruent with our own value system as we can. But the idea, that is in everything that we talk about, and everything any other, I think, spiritual or psychological teaching really has, is being in the present moment. And the way we do that is, all I can do is measure how I'm doing right now. It's like, it's like, that's it. And so I believe, what I choose to believe is that I can hope for and even work for things being better. But if they're not, if I continue to be surprised by things that I used to say, well, at least that wouldn't happen, or the Sinclair Lewis, novel back from the last century, it could never happen here, it's like, well, it can. And it's like, so I want to be able to, and the other piece is, I know I'm giving a little sermon here, but it's like, the other piece is let's not villainize disappointment. It's just, it's not a feeling, it's a collection of feelings. It's like, it's an experience that we have. But the other thing we also teach in emotional sobriety is the multiplicity of mind and the multiplicity of our soul. It's like, there's more of me than that. So I can feel disappointed and still have what I think of as like healthy, not, I know how to do unhealthy way, but healthy compartmentalization, where I can put that away, and I can go about my life, and I can live my life and enjoy my life. I can go, if I'm Allen, I'm going on the river tomorrow. I'm going to do that. That doesn't mean I'm no longer feeling the other things that are going on, but it does mean I'm living my life as fully as I can. Amen.
Yeah, no, that resonates.
So here's another dimension of this to discuss. So where does that disappointment come from, right? So the definition says hopes or expectations, right?
Yeah.
I think that many of us are incredibly idealistic, because we really hope for things to be a certain way, meaning the way we think they should be.
Fair, for instance, like we were talking about fair.
Oh, how many patients come in and say this wasn't fair? I mean, we hear that all the time. I've replaced the word fair with unfortunate.
Yes,
there's a lot of things that happen that are unfortunate, and it has nothing to do with fairness, that are unfortunate. But see, what you were saying, Tom, it's so true, because the meaning I give to that disappointment, let's say that I don't do the investigation you talked about, and start to question. You remember when we talked about how the consciousness starts to change when we start to mature, right? Like we talked about a healthy paranoia, where you start to become suspicious of what you're feeling and what's making you feel that way. Hey, instead of being suspicious of everybody else and what they've done wrong, we just get suspicious of, how am I creating my existence? We start to ask that question and investigate it. And I think that there's so much benefit from that investigation. But as we start to do that, when I started to do that in my life, I realized that this is a really, really complex and deep issue, because it goes back to, how was disappointment dealt with in my family? Right? How is disappointment developed in our culture, or dealt with in our culture? How do we handle this? Are we able to work through the pain of the disappointment and then get on with the business of accepting it and seeing what it means to us now and how best to respond to it? I've rarely seen that as a response to disappointment.
I realized that one of the things that, when you start talking about that when we start looking for all the answers on the outside, and we start looking inside, and we have that healthy paranoia, that skepticism that we need to where too often we may have idealism in there. That's fascinating. It's one of the things that makes me love this job, but the fascination is not just about the job. I've learned about so much about myself, and it's like, one of the things I just realized as you were talking is, I think one of the things I've been doing lately is trying to introduce clients I work with to that fascination, to the fact that this is not going to fix everything for you, but this is really kind of a cool way to be, because there's so much to learn.
Yes, that's right. I feel that excitement. Listen,
even about ourselves. It's not just I'm excited because you're nuts and I can analyze you. It's like, no, I can go like, wow.
Right. I know.
Why am I responding this way?
No, I shared with Patrick, the thing that's kept me, I think one of the things that's kept me in recovery, in addition to being able to hang out with people like you and Patrick, is the excitement that came from that curiosity that was awakened. I mean, that has been, and that's why I come to this podcast week in, week out, just like the Thursday night meeting. I'm still as excited about it as when we started, if not more, because we're still finding new ways to talk about it, looking at different dimensions of it, finding a texture that we couldn't see before. I mean, it's a remarkable process, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's one of those places where I go like, we could have to have real jobs. It's like, but we have conversations for a living. It's like, there's different ways of saying it, but we do that with our clients, and these conversations with you guys are very much like my relationships and my conversations with my clients. You have ideas when you walk in the room, to do that, but you don't know where this conversation is going to go. And it's like, and could you have written any of your books without your clients, without those conversations? It's where they all come from.
Without my clients and without,
it's like my thinking,
examining my own behavior.
Well, and so being in therapy with our own therapist and being with support people, it's like, I've often thought that if I ever were to retire from doing clinical work, I definitely need to be writing something different than self-help books, because that's where that material comes from. Yeah.
Well, let me share kind of my experience with disappointment, and then we can maybe even kind of extract from that some of this emotional sobriety stuff. So, it's no secret. You guys have heard me talk about the, incredible disappointment I had when my father died when he was 39. I was 11. I was devastated by the whole thing. I couldn't deal with any of those feelings. And no one around me was really dealing with them well. They were lamenting and really stuck in this theme that it shouldn't have happened this way. Right? My grandfather would say, your son is supposed to bury you, you're not supposed to bury him. My mom would be crying about, I was supposed to grow old with your father, and he was supposed to help me raise you guys. Now I have to figure out how to do this myself. So that's not how it should have been, right? It's not how it was supposed to be, and I'm there doing my version of that. I was supposed to have my dad around to help guide me through high school and, through all the trials and tribulations that are coming. So my response to that was, in my immediate environment, my family and stuff, there was no one for me to turn to. I saw everybody struggling and suffering themselves. And so I didn't find any resource. I didn't even think of turning outside my family. Of course, at 11, I didn't say, "Hey, Mom, I think it's good for me to go to therapy now."
Right.
That wasn't available for me. And it wasn't available for my mom to say, "Hey, I think we need some family therapy to learn how to, as a family, deal."
It really was every man, woman, and child for themselves. It really was.
That was the theme, Tom. And so what I did, two things happened to me. I didn't want to have any more hopes because I thought that would set me up, right? So I tried to live a hope-free life.
And see, and by the way, when we're investigating that, it's logical. See, that's very smart.
Very smart adaptation, right? I mean, but, there's also a part of, I think, the human spirit that looks for and wants to look at the future and have hope that some things could be different, right?
Right.
That's one of the things that carried the American Revolution and these guys continuing to fight the way they did, is that they had hope that victory would be after the next defeat, right? That they didn't let that stop them. So there was a part of me so I had this interesting thing as having these needs, but not wanting to have them. So talk about the conflict, right? Now, here I go. The committee's now forming, right? The Allen that's having very naturally has these needs and desires, and the other guys are saying, "No, wait a minute. We're not going to have those needs and desires, because you know what's going to happen if we have those. You're going to get disappointed and hurt again. And by the way, you don't know how to deal with that disappointment. You go get drunk, you go get loaded, you go up in your room, you go masturbate. I mean, whatever it is, it's like you don't have any tools, buddy." So that factor, now that wasn't a conscious factoring in, but it was definitely an unconscious factoring that I had very little capacity to be able to absorb, process, integrate, digest disappointment and grow from it.
It's also, let me just put this in there. It's also thematic. It's also a theme that so many people, human beings, experience, which is, because I have these needs, with, again, not a conscious thing. I have these needs. I don't know how to meet these needs. I don't. The people around me are not meeting these needs. I should not need anything. And so all of a sudden we think we can't stop our needs, so they just store up as unmet. And that's, all we can say about that is, well, it's a living, what
I think what happened with that with me, that's when I became selfish.
Yeah. Oh, you have to.
That's when I became selfish, because I didn't think any of you guys out there would give a shit about me. It's all going to have to be all about me, because it's every man and woman for themselves, right?
Right.
And the boat's sinking, and the boat is sinking, right?
Right. And people feel guilty about having needs. People deny having needs, and they mistakenly think. And I've heard you talk about this actually recently. I don't know if it's the exact language, but it's like the idea that the way to be independent is not to be without needs. That's counter. We have a term for that. It's called counter-dependency, which is pretty much a phobic response to having a need from anything. But the truth is, people who are truly independent, and we go back to our topic, which is emotional sobriety, are extremely good at identifying our needs and extremely resourceful at getting those needs met. Now, what we discover is there are all kinds of ways that we didn't know we had that we can meet our needs internally for ourselves. But when we need other people, when I need you and Patrick, it's like, I know how to get that too.
Yeah.
It's
so
like,
here's an interesting that happened to me. So the more I denied those needs, the more I was building up this hope unconsciously that I would find the right woman that would solve all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was my search for glory. And
Right.
it had a name. She was Denise, my first wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Denise was going to be it. She was this cute little blonde that I met when I was 16 and reconnected with after Vietnam. And I went into this with all of these unconscious expectations that she would reverse all of the experience in my past.
Well, and if you forgot about that at any given time, all you had to do was go to the movies.
That's right. Well, listen, all I had to do was live with Denise for a couple of years and starting to realize, you know what? This isn't actually, she has her own needs. She's not here just to meet mine.
That's trouble.
I mean, talk about immaturity. My God. I was often surprised when she would talk about things she needed in a relationship. And, it's like, here now comes very important dialogue between us. And it really culminated at the time when she was clear not wanting to be a mom, which I'm so grateful for and I love her for today. But at the time, my desire to be a dad was so strong. And I thought, look, she's blocking me from having what I want. She wasn't blocking me. It meant that I had to give up the hope that she would be the answers for everything. And, be honest with myself. If that's what I wanted, then I had to create the opportunity for it. Denise wasn't going to do that, which meant that I had to walk away from someone I loved and cared about.
Well, the gift, I've heard you talk about this some before. The one gift she offered you there is her clarity. Absolutely.
That's right. And today I couldn't appreciate it at the time. I hated it. I was so mad about it, and all that stuff and blamed her. See, that's the other thing I want to really make a note. If you find yourself blaming, yourself or others for your disappointment, you're not going to be able to learn from what's going on.
Right.
Now, you have to go through that. I'm not saying you shouldn't blame yourself, but don't see it as a stopping point.
Right.
See it as a step towards the next step, which is now saying, what does this mean to me that's getting so angry about?
Well, and the other piece, you just added another piece of that, because one of the things we can use is lessons from our past is remember, don't ever forget how many things happen to us that with hindsight we can interpret in different ways. I mean, like we wouldn't expect you to see that clarity of you could not, from where that you were, you couldn't see the clarity as a gift. However, remember now, when the next time you're in distress, remember that wait a minute, I don't see the whole picture.
Yeah,
so that right. And I think it helps us move through quicker.
It does. So look, this has been a great, lively discussion. I am not disappointed in it at all.
I'm not either.
I'm rarely disappointed here. Maybe there's a lesson in that.
Probably not.
All right. Until next time, we've got some guests coming up, which I'll let you guys know about on social media. Hope you guys have a great weekend.
Have fun, Alan.
Take care, guys.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.